what we're asking for more than anything else is consistency and stick to the policies that we're all planning for, because there's a lot of money being spent preparing for things that in the end don't turn up.
What is it like running a supermarket in the current climate? Well, James Bailey is Executive Director for Waitrose and joins me now. Morning, James.
Morning, Matt. Thanks for having me.
No, it's good to have you here. Of course, everyone knows what Waitrose is like. What is it like running Britain's poshest supermarket in a cost of living crisis?
It's never not interesting running a supermarket, put it that way. And yeah, it has definitely been a challenging couple of years with COVID and then inflation. So let's say we're busy, shall we?
And how do you cope with that? Because part of the appeal, the reason that people like going to Waitrose is because they pay a bit more, and there's there's things in Waitrose maybe you can't get in other places. But if people are starting to feel the pinch, you presumably risk losing customers to budget supermarkets.
Yes and no. I think the things that Waitrose stand for, quality, service, and ethics, are still very important to an awful lot of people. Most customers shop in a number of shops, so they might be picking up one or two more items in a different supermarket because they're feeling the pinch. That's true. But customers who shop at Waitrose care about those things. They care quite deeply where their food comes from, and they enjoy their food, so it's pretty important. So a lot of customers, you'd be surprised how many customers would rather cut back on something else than go into cheaper food.
Last year, Waitrose sales fell by 3%. There's clearly a lot of trouble going on the high street. Are you going to have to look at closing stores?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we're lucky at Waitrose. It's part of the John Lewis partnership. We're a private business. We're owned by everyone who works here, so we can think a bit longer term than some other businesses. And you know what? We've got about 320 shops, and that's probably about the right number. We cover most of the UK. We've got everyone covered on our online delivery service. So at the moment, there's no big plans to close, or unfortunately also not to open shops in the near future. But at the moment, the business is in good shape. So no plans to close any.
A couple of weeks ago, I had Mark Rowley, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, on the show. And we were talking about shoplifting, because there's been some criticism that not enough has been done to tackle shoplifting. How big a problem is it right now in your stores?
Yeah, it's a big problem everywhere. There's been a lot in the news recently, and that's for good reason. We've seen a loss of products, probably from theft, go up about a third in the last 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's we're pretty much in the pack across the supermarket, so it's a very big issue. And it's a combination of people feeling maybe a little bit more desperate, which is obviously understandable, but it's also an enormous problem for the partners that work in our branches, because they're facing physical threats, and they have to make snap decisions about whether to intervene or not. And we ask them not to, because we don't want them in trouble. We don't want them putting themselves at risk. But yeah, it's a significant issue across all supers, and it would be very helpful if the police responded a little bit more quickly, or were able to respond a little bit more quickly. We'd like to work with them to encourage them into the stores a little bit more.
Is that been a problem for you, that when you have had issues in stores, you call the police? And actually, I think the phrase has been used before, is that there's been almost a license to shoplift. The part of the reason why it's got up so much is because people basically know the chance of them being caught or arrested, never mind charged and convicted, is pretty low.
I think that might be part of the problem. I've got every sympathy with the police. It's not like they've not got other priorities as well. And you sometimes hear the phrase that shoplifting is a victimless crime. It's a bottle of whiskey or a leg of lamb walking out of a supermarket, but that's not true. We see assaults on our staff all the time, our partners, so do other supermarkets. And of course, in the end, unfortunately, all of us are paying for this theft in pricing. So it has to come back somewhere. So I do have sympathy with the police. I know they're overstretched, but if we could get a few more convictions, a bit more attention paid to shoplifting, I'm sure it would help.
What sorts of things get stolen from Waitrose stores?
Yeah, well, yeah, you'd be amazed. Like I said, people walk out with joints of beef down their trousers. There's a lot of booze because it's high value. Razors, sometimes that's high value and resaleable. But broadly, you name it. Sometimes depending on the situation, someone's going to be prepared to try and steal it. So it's an ongoing battle of wills, if you like, with a small group of determined people versus the supermarket trade.
And more broadly, then, away from shoplifting, how, over the cost of living crisis, and actually, you go back before that, the pandemic as well, how is what we're buying and eating changed? Are there things that, and particularly because I'd say my impression would be that Waitrose is probably the forefront of food fads and fashion. What's currently very in, and what was in which you've noticed is dropping away?
These things change. They are a feature of how people are behaving, what's going on in people's lives. So, I mean, the current obvious trend is that a lot of people who are going to work are taking packed lunches. That's either leftovers. Sometimes it's the curry from the night before. It's a sandwich and crisps you've made at home. But that's just a feature of people maybe working from home a little bit more, so getting more used to making their own food, but also trying to save a couple of quid on not going to a sandwich shop or something. So there's all sorts of different trends working their way through. Last year, obviously, it was all about air fryers, which seems to have passed now, and sometimes you get fad ingredients that arrive, but it's much more normally to do with changes to people's livelihoods and the way they're acting, and like you say, COVID and the inflationary pressures we've seen in the market have been the biggest factors in the last couple of years.
Earlier this week, we were talking to someone from the Cold Chain Federation. They were saying that the new rules, which are coming in, I think at the end of October, post-Brexit customs checks, there's been various holidays and whatever, the sort of deadlines at the end of October, worried about what you will and won't be able to get through into the UK. And actually, it was quite a lot of the stuff. It was, it's meats and cheeses from across Europe, essentially, the sort of thing that you'd expect to see on the deli in Waitrose. Is that something that you're concerned about in the run up to Christmas?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are concerned. I think it affects everyone. I think actually I'd be more concerned for more sort of smaller shops, more delis in your local village or local town, because it's going to be much harder for some of those guys to get some of the specialist product through the door. We've got lots of big relationships, and we can organise ourselves. We've got plenty of people to do the work for us. I'm more concerned about the impact on small delis and specialist shops, because those are most often the lifeblood of a high street in a great village or a town. So I think it will have an effect. We're going to have to wait and see, but it's another bit of red tape, another bit of headwind that probably those shops and the food industry doesn't need at the moment.
And what else is concerning you at the moment? On the one hand, you're trying to keep the shops open and making sure the customers are coming in and spending their money and not putting joints of beef down their trousers. What are the regulatory things that if Rishi Sunak was listening to this while he's standing in the queue for a roller coaster at Disneyland, what would you want to say to him which would make your life easier?
Well, Matt, I mean, the hardest part of the last couple of years in terms of our in terms of the regulation and the way the government have been moving is more a sort of a lack of consistency. So several big pieces of legislation have changed or have been pushed back or have been ditched, and sometimes at the last minute. So just recently we've had the extended producer responsibility in packaging pushed back another year, and that might not sound like much, but a lot of supermarkets, including ourselves, have spent a lot of money trying to prepare for that. And so having that having those big policies moved around, and you saw deposit return scheme in Scotland move a couple of years. Most supermarkets had already spent multiple millions of pounds trying to prepare for that. So what we're asking for more than anything else is consistency, and stick to the policies that we're all planning for, because there's a lot of money being spent preparing for things that in the end don't turn up. So above everything else, yes, please, can we let's have a consistent and reliable plan that we can all work towards.
James, just before I let you go, the big question we're asking today is our last food fight on Food Week is beer or wine. What's your preference?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're having quite a boozy Friday morning. I wasn't quite prepared for that one, but and if any of my friends were listening and I said beer, they'd probably laugh their heads off, because I'm not the biggest beer drinker, so I'm going to have to say wine. But if I can go for a half category, I'd go for a nice lager shandy on a nice warm afternoon.
Oh, lovely stuff. James, really good to speak to you. Really fascinating. James Bailey, there, Executive Director for Waitrose. Thanks so much for joining us. Oh, lovely stuff.
No problem.
Good to speak to you. Cheers, James.